welcome to the Power of You. My name is Tanya Shagnon with NABO headquarters. I'm so happy to host this educational series. If I can ask everyone to please mute your microphones, and if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put those in chat. Michael will be going through and answering those while he speaks, or we might save some of them till the end as well. But we promise all questions will get answered. And this is recorded, and we will be posting it on the Institute for everyone to listen to again, because this information is so super important. There's some mandatory reporting that we're all going to have to be doing by the end of this year, and a lot of people don't know about it. So I'm so thankful to Walters Kluwer for being here to tell us all about this. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Michael Powell with Walters Kluwer to talk to us about this super important reporting that we have to do. Mike, the show is yours, and you can take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tanya. I appreciate it. And thank you all to inviting us to speak about the Corporate Transparency Act. It's don't feel bad if you don't know about it or you don't understand it. You're in good company. There's a lot of people that really don't understand this. And so we've been trying to go around and make the rounds and talk to people about it and make sure that you understand at least what it's about, and if your business has to comply with the act and file a beneficial ownership report. But before I get that, I'll just give you a little bit about my background. I'm a lawyer. I've been in working with entities for about 30 some years. I was previously with the Secretary of State of Texas, been with WK for 4 years. Before that, I was a director of corporations and UCC filings with the Texas Secretary of State. And the reason I mention is it'll become important. It's kind of important to understand really where my background comes. And I've been doing this so long that I actually started at Secretary of State when the Corporate Transparency Act was introduced in one of its early iterations by Senators Obama and Levin in 2008. So it's been around, and they wanted the Secretary of States to verify who owns an entity and who are the people running it. And so Tristan, if you could go to the next screen, and before I get way off top. And so this is kind of the agenda, who we are, some background on the CTA, who files the report, what information is reported, when is the report due, when to update, the penalties. And then Tristan's going to go a little bit into preparing to file and how to comply and business filings. So Tristan, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. And hi, folks. Tristan Partridge here. I'm the Partnerships Manager and Affiliates Manager here at Walters Kluwer. And I work with all of our BOI reporting partners, a lot of different banks, a lot of different associations like yourselves. And today, my portion of this webinar will be spent looking over a video demo of our filing solution, Biz Filings in Action. And you'll see what the experience looks like from a filer's perspective. So a lot of the folks on the call here, being business owners yourselves, this will be very reflective of the experience you're going to go through. Other than that, looking forward to fielding your questions and going through the rest of the presentation. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Tristan. Okay. All right. And this is just a little bit about who Walters Kluwer is. We're a very big company. I'm part of, Tristan and I are part of the Finance and Corporate Compliance. My division is CT Corporation, you may have heard of. We've been around for 132 years, helping small to large companies and law firms form companies from the beginning till its end, till an entity's end. And so we help companies in the compliance area. And so this has been kind of something that's come right in our bailiwick. And as Associate Director of Government Relations, I've been intimately involved, or very involved, with the FinCEN, which is the organization, the agency running the Corporate Transparency Act. So we will kind of go into that a little bit with how CT or biz filings can help. So, okay, Tristan. Well, that's a loaded question. Why did Congress pass the CTA? And I'll go into here, if we can go to the next screen, why it was passed. It was passed in 2021. It became effective in January 1st, 2021. The Congress overrode President Trump's veto, which apparently was not related to the CTA. It was part of a huge bill. And so Congress fashioned this really with bipartisan support, but it's to find out who really owns an entity. Many businesses will put, another limited partnership or an LLP or an LLC or corporation as an owner, and that's used to conceal ownership. In many cases, by terrorists, people who are laundering money, other illicit uses. Human trafficking, for example, has been cited quite a bit, and we recently had a case in Austin that I'll go over a little bit related to this. And so the feds needed something to be able to collect this information. And I can tell you from my time as Secretary of State, there were many, many times when law enforcement would come to us and say, "Who owns this entity?" Uh, and so, kind of give two examples of that. One's kind of humorous, and one not so much. Uh, when I was at Secretary of State, I got a call from former President George H.W. Bush's Secret Service uh, leader, and he called and he said the former president was asked by his neighbor to find out who the owner of a business that he was thinking about doing business with. And so I said, well, let me check. And I looked for the agent, and it was another entity. And so he said, well, can you see who owns that? And I went down this path, and ultimately I told him he had to go to Delaware to find out, if there was anybody listed there who was an individual. And he was not too excited about that. He thought it was very cumbersome, and he wanted to know why we didn't verify the information. And most states don't. Most states don't even list who is an officer and director or owner of an entity. So the feds had to look for some way to get that. So I was not even able to help a former president, which can't get much higher than that. Also, the bad actors will find a way to get around things, and they're going to find a way to get around this as well. But the feds need information really fast, and you'll see that in the amount of time that they provide for a company to file and to provide updates, because it's very important for them to be able to get the information instead of all the cumbersome processes they go through now. There's a show on Apple TV called Cowboy Cartel that kind of goes over this, and it talks about how the cartel formed entities uh, to launder money, and they happen to do horse races. And this was one of the first things I got involved with when I was at the Secretary of State, filing in response to a subpoena. I had to file an affidavit, and it was the Los Zetas cartel. They formed a company through a guy who had never really done a brother of one of the cartel people, and they were able to launder quite a bit of money. They became very successful because apparently money wasn't a problem, and that's when it drew attention to the feds that, hey, there's something going on, and they started investigating. They had to go through all these layers of companies to find who really owned the horse racing operation. So that's the reason why Congress passed the bill. Okay, let's go to the next. So what's the reach of this? And I'm talking to Tanya a little bit at the beginning. Um, Many of you are going to fall in this in the reaches or the hands of this regulation. FinCEN, and I'll explain who they are in a minute, estimates there's 32 million companies that are in existence right now, and and have until the end of the year to file. And to date, 3.5 million companies have filed, and that's not very good. That's 10%, and that's going to either put on a rush at the end of the year, or if you don't know about it, technically you could be in violation of the law. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if there's a big crunch at the end of the year. But the company or the agency in charge is a pretty obscure agency. It's called Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, and they're very small. They have less people than the California Secretary of State. And they have, before this, they were in charge of processing Bank Secrecy Act suspicious activity reports. So if you open up a bank account when you formed your business, they had to get information from you to know their customer. And that's not going away, but so now you have to provide it when you form the company, and you'll have to provide it to the bank until they do further regulations to see if they can share the information. So they don't have you don't have to provide that personal identifying information twice. And then also, I just want to throw this in there. There's also states that are looking at having the same kind of requirement that you have to provide beneficial ownership information to those state agencies in addition to the federal requirements. New York is the only one to date that has passed a legislation. The California, Maryland, Massachusetts are trying to pass legislation requiring businesses in those states to file beneficial ownership reports. So the fund will keep growing here, I think. Okay. And you say, well, I got to provide this information to the federal government. Who has access to it? And it's really restricted. The feds said that they're using the most advanced cybersecurity protections that they have. It's not going to be public access. It's limited to federal, state, local, tribal government officials in law enforcement. They'll also allow, in certain cases, through some pretty rigorous steps, access to foreign law enforcement officials. And the final stage will be financial institutions, mainly banks, to access that information. And the banks will use it to verify that you are who you say you are. Okay. What's holding back some people from filing a beneficial ownership information report is there is a case in Alabama. U.S. District Court judge found that the act was unconstitutional, and that case is on appeal, and it'll be oral arguments will be heard at the end of September. So it's on expedited appeal. Believe it or not, that's expedited, and they should have a ruling before the end of the year. Though the judgment or the unconstitutional prohibiting enforcement against is only for the plaintiffs, and that's the people that belonged on March 1st, the National Association or Small Business Association, and a named plaintiff, and that's about 30,000 entities that do not have to file a report. Everybody else, and FinCEN put on their website really quickly after the ruling that you still have to file if you're not one of those two groups. So a lot of people think, well, I'll just wait to see how the lawsuit goes. There's just many different ways that could come out, and then you find out, hey, I'm in violation of the act now if you waited and nothing happens this year. So I wouldn't, unless you're one of those plants, I wouldn't rely on that. Okay, who files the BOI report? Reporting companies do. So who's the reporting company? Well, if you filed with the Secretary of State, your corporation, LLC, or limited partnership, then you are a domestic reporting company, unless you're exempt. And we'll go over the exemptions in a second. So I'm assuming most of the folks in this audience have formed companies. Is that, Tony, would you say that's accurate? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, sorry.
Oh, no, you're perfect. Yes, that is accurate.
Okay. And probably LLCs, I'm guessing, since that's
Correct.
Okay. Then there's also under the act is foreign reporting companies, which are companies that are formed overseas. It could be a Chinese company, a French company, and they register to do business at a Secretary of State. So they are also under the act, unless exempt. And then there's other entities that really kind of obscure that are filed at the Secretary of State that may also be under the act. But if they're not filed with the Secretary of State, such as a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, they don't have to register. They don't have to file beneficial ownership reports. So that's pretty clear. I mean, if you're formed at the Secretary of State, you're going to need to file unless exempt. If you just filed a trade name at the county level, or the parish level in Louisiana, then you're probably exempt if you're a sole proprietor or a general partnership. Okay. 23 exemptions. And most of this is if you're a heavily regulated or regulated industry like securities industry, you're already filing a lot of things with the secretary or with the federal government. They can find that information a lot more easy or more easy. What is that? Easily compared to trying to find information on a business filed with the Secretary of State. So you see a lot of different kind of industries here that are exempt from filing with beneficial ownership report, with the exception of a couple that I think are relevant here. But I will say, even the large companies, and we have a definition of that too, are very, because they have so many structured entities, they're finding they have to file their different subsidiaries and things like that. So they thought at first they were exempt, and now they're finding that, hey, these subsidiaries we created to hold all our assets or to hold the employees, based on the definitions, they may have to file. So companies are having to look at each entity, entity by entity, to make sure that that entity is not required to file with the FinCEN and the beneficial ownership report. Okay. And probably the most prominent and maybe more applicable here is, what is a large operating company? And all three tiers of this have to be met. More than 20 full-time employees, an operating presence at a physical location in the U.S., and more than $5 million in gross receipts or sales. And what's kind of hard about this is, let's say you have seasonal employees, so you're exempt maybe during the summer. Well, then you could file for an exemption, and maybe you go below 20, then you have to go from exempt to non-exempt, and you have to file a beneficial ownership report. So this act requires you, depending on if you're applying for exempt or if you're exempt, to monitor that and make sure you're still exempt or not exempt. So it's not easy to keep up with this. Sorry, you can go ahead. Yeah. So who's a beneficial owner? And I will read this because it is important. Any individual who directly or indirectly either exercises substantial control over a reporting company, or owns or controls at least 25% of the ownership interest of a reporting company. So if I have my own LLC, I'm the only person, I'm the beneficial owner. And that's most entities. Probably about, I think FinCEN said about 59% are just single owner, and they file. Where it gets a little tricky is if you have a board or if you have members of your LLC that also exercise substantial control. And there's a whole bunch of definitions of substantial control that have caused no end of confusion for a lot of people. So typically, though, I think most people are probably where it's just one or two people in the entity, and then you just report that information. Okay. So what you find out, you're a beneficial owner, Mike's LLC. I've got a file. I have to report about the company, the full legal name, any trade or DBA name. And this is important, not a post office box, but a street address of the business. And if you work out of home, you got to put the home address. The jurisdiction of where you formed, and if you're a foreign entity, where did you register? Did you come to the U.S. and you register in Delaware, or are you doing business in a state where I'm like Texas? So you have to provide that, and then the EIN number or TIN number. And then you have to provide the information on all the beneficial owners. And what many lawyers and accountants have said has been difficult is getting this information, if you have partners or other members of an LLC, to get everybody to give this information so that the entity can file its beneficial ownership report. So you don't want to wait till the end of the year to file and then try to find everybody on your board or that are members of your organization that have substantial control, trying to find this and provide this information. And again, it's full legal name, date of birth, again, a residential street address, not a business address, and a unique ID which could be your passport, state ID, or driver's license, and an image of that. So it's not a lot of PII, but there is a certain amount that you really want FinCEN to protect. And then there's also a thing called company applicants. And we'll give the details of what a company applicant is, but they give the same information, except they can use a company address. And I know this gets confusing because there's so many different nuances here, but you do have to report a company applicant. And I think that's the next screen. Yes. So if you're formed after January 1st of this year, you have to list a company applicant, and that is a person, and there's up to two you have to report. You don't have to report two if there's, and you'll see in a second, but if there's two people, one who directly files a document with the Secretary of State, creating a LLC or business or a foreign registration. So if you have business filings, file an entity for you, they will be the one applicant because they're directly filing the document with the Secretary of State. And then it may be your lawyer, your accountant, or yourself, who the person is that's responsible for directing or controlling the filing. So if you give it to your law firm, say, hey, form an LLC in Delaware for me, or North Dakota, then that person would also be an applicant, and they need to be included in the beneficial ownership report, but never more than two. And if you were formed before January 1st, 2024, you don't have to list applicant information. And the reason FinCEN wanted applicant information, much like the cartel with the horse racing, they wanted to be able to see, okay, who's forming all these entities? They're looking for patterns of some people that may be involved, like lawyers who are, working for bad actors, and are they forming a lot of entities, accountants, tax preparers? Who's forming these entities that are coming under investigation? And they want to see if there's a pattern, what that person would know. If you're just forming an entity for yourself, it's not as big a deal, but you still have to record it. But they're looking for patterns. That was because it's different from what Europe requires. And so everybody always asks, well, why do you guys have that? And what I've been told by law enforcement is, hey, we're just looking for patterns for new entities. If somebody's forming a lot of, bad actors, LLCs and stuff like that. Then the next question becomes, when is this report due? Oops, if you go back to the previous one. This is also a little confusing. So if you're formed before January 1st, 2024, you have to file by the end of the year. If you're formed this year, you have 90 days from when you form and get evidence of your filing back, or it becomes available on the Secretary of State's website. You have 90 days from that time to file a BOI report if you don't have an exemption. And again, same thing if you're a foreign entity and you register in the state, you have 30 days after 2025. So that's the rub of this. FinCEN was getting a lot of complaints at the time about, hey, this is a new act. Hardly anybody knows about it. Give us a little more time to file this BOI. So they did a kind of a temporary rule, says, okay, we're going to give you 90 days instead of 30 this year only. Next year, it reverts back to 30 days. And then if you were exempt, but you no longer, then you have 30 calendar days after no longer qualified. So really the date to kind of keep in mind is 30 days after. And I know that's going to be tough because a lot of entities with the Secretary of State don't always file documents within the time periods, because you're running a business. You don't have time. You don't have the knowledge of all the different rules and requirements. So that's why we're here, because we do keep track of all this stuff. So please reach out if you have questions when you file something. So if you change the ownership of your business with the Secretary of State, then you have to update your BOI report. If you add a trade name or assume name, you have to report to the Secretary of State. Change in owners, change in personal information. If you're like me, let your passport go, expire right before you're going on a trip, you have to provide the new number to FinCEN as well. And Again, if you don't qualify or do qualify for exemption, you have to file an update. And I did just see a question on do you have to file this yearly? No, you file one time unless there's changes. But if you just file one time and there's no changes, you're good. And then I can't really see the next question. Oh, sorry, PII. Yeah, sometimes I just assume everybody knows my acronyms. Sorry about that. Okay, next. Okay, so of course, being the feds, there has to be a stick, right? They want everybody to comply. So the civil penalty can be up to $591 per day. The violation continues. There's also a criminal penalty, a maximum of $10,000 fine. In addition to the $591 per day violation, you could be fined $10,000 and 2 years imprisonment or both. The caveat is the violations have to be willfully. It's willfully you intend to do it. You say, heck, I'm not going to register. They can come after me. My company doesn't make any money. Why would I do this? Whatever the reasons are, if you willfully fail to report, then you could find yourself again, being investigated for violations. And if you give false or fraudulent information, say you have a hard time collecting the information, I'll just file it the way I have it. Incomplete would also be probably willfully filing an incomplete report would also probably be under a willful violation. So companies and individuals are subject to penalties. So it's important to make sure that you comply. If you're not sure, check with an accountant, check with your lawyer. I recommend a lawyer, being a lawyer, but also your accountants. They're the ones probably the most familiar with your company. So I would definitely ask them if you're not sure. But just saying I'm not going to do this isn't really a good course of action. And when I was at Secretary of State, I was in charge of enforcement for certain activities. And I could tell you, you would go back and look, okay, this company, because the director of FinCEN said, hey, we're just worried about compliance. We're not going to sit there and worry about, enforcing that this year. But I can tell you 3 years down the road, and they say they didn't file for that first year, second year, third, you're going to start calculating penalties, even though they said this is the first year's discompliance. I wouldn't go to the bank on that, just knowing from my experience that we sometimes find people for those years they were not, they said they didn't know about the, regulatory or statutory requirements. And it's critical that you understand these things can lead to violations that could cause civil penalties up pretty substantial, $591 a day. So again, one of the first cases I ever heard, judge banged the gavel and said, ignorance of the law is no excuse. My friend that I was defending on a speeding ticket paid the speeding ticket after that. But I'll never forget that. Just ignorance of the law is no excuse. And this is in spite of FinCEN's really pretty horrible marketing of getting the word out. First of all, nobody's heard of FinCEN. Nobody's really explained to businesses, hey, you got to do this. It's not they'll maybe throw out some FAQs as guidance or, a news release of the director of the speech. I know when I ran a business, I didn't have time to sit there and keep up with that stuff. So really rely on a service company like such as ours that keeps all that information. I work with FinCEN constantly to make sure we get our opinions across about certain of their thoughts. Like they think dissolved entities are involved in a lot of bad acts. And so they were going to really bring the hammer and let those guys file. And there's still some question whether, if you have an entity that you just administratively let the state dissolve it, that thing can be reinstated. That would still be considered someone who has to file a report. So, but for today, I would want you to walk away with FinCEN is looking for an individual. If you don't meet any of the exemptions, you are required to file. There's just no getting around that. This is a federal law. There's federal regs and there's penalties. So unless you're one of the exemptions, which if you're a smaller company, typically you're going to have to file. Okay. And Tristan, you want to take it away for me? Or?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. And so I'm going to jump into how we can help help you folks comply with this new regulation using our tool BizFilings. So before I jump into it, and which will be a quick video demo of the tool in action, I kind of want to just set the stage of what this tool is. It's essentially a value add, better user experience for filing this BOI report directly with FinCEN. We have a direct API with them, so it's not like you'll submit your report via BizFilings. It shows up on someone's desk at Wolters Kluwer, and then we repunch it in to FinCEN's website. That's not how it works. It goes directly to them. It's much more secure that way as well. And that's how it essentially will function. I'd say the best parallel I can draw with maybe another existing product that people know about is something like a tax service like Free Tax USA or TurboTax, where essentially you'll be paying a slightly more premium amount to use this better experience and have better functionality. And I'm going to dive into that in the video demo right here. Okay. Oh, did I pause it? All right. So this is our BizFilings interface. There's going to be a couple pieces of information we're going to enter to kick things off. The example company we're using for today is Travel to Wisconsin LLC. And right now we're entering the legal name of the company or the DBA or trade names of the company. There's also a checkbox here that asks, is your company created before January 1st or after? And this will trigger a couple of different workflows, specifically around the company applicant. And now it's going to determine where was your company formed. You're going to enter your US tax ID number. And you're also going to need to check if this is a foreign pooled investment vehicle, which will trigger a couple of other workflow items specific to companies that fall under that category. But right now, we're just punching in the actual physical address, the place of business for the reporting company. And for the sake of this presentation, we'll say that the person doing this is the filer. That could be anyone necessarily within the company. But for going forward, I'm going to refer to this person as the filer. So the demo is now going to show 3 different ways that you can add a beneficial owner. We also have useful tooltips here that define what control is, what ownership means. So this will give you, as the filer, a little bit more information if you're not sure about what that necessarily entails. But it's pretty straightforward when it comes to the ownership side of things, but it can get a little more nebulous when it comes to those who exercise control. So we have defined that with our tooltips. And we have the same for the company applicants. So what is a company applicant, a first company applicant, a second company applicant? And we also have links to FinCEN's guidance on company applicants for you to check out as well. Oh, and I see Becky just added the quiz to the chat. That is a very useful item. Thank you, Becky. All right, so back to the demo here. So right now you are reviewing the initial filer's information. And now we can add more additional beneficial owners. So this is an example of punching in those details manually. Pam Parsons, maybe you have her home address or you've got her driver's license handy, or maybe it's you specifically, so you can just punch this in. Obviously, we'll always have the option to do manual entry. However, it is not the most efficient compared to some of the other methods that are here within BizFilings. So punching in that date. And you will need a type of identification document for this. So it can be a non-expired driver's license, US passport, etc. And here you will punch in those details as well. We will need an image of this document as well. So again, this is just from the perspective of someone doing everything manually within BizFilings. And here is just another confirmation page just to make sure everything is good before you add it. And the beneficial owner will now actually, in addition to being added to this report, will be saved for future reports or future updates that you may need. So now it's going to show the functionality of being able to send an invitation to your additional beneficial owners. So essentially, this will send an email invitation to the other owners within your company structure. And when they receive it, they'll get a secure link that will prompt them to enter their information themselves. And what is really great about this is that the recipient of this invitation can actually just take a picture of their driver's license from their phone, and our technology will grasp all of that pertinent information and automatically populate it into your beneficial owner list. So that is the best way to really gather everyone's PII rather than having to jumble a bunch of driver's licenses and passports on your desk or sending pictures of them over unsecured text message, etc. And I'm just going to pause it right there because it kind of blasted through that section a little bit. So I'm going to go back just a touch here. Now, this is showing some previously entered beneficial owners that are saved by the software. So if you want to add additional ones with just a click of a button, it will save that information, and it makes it a lot easier to add these folks for updates, additional reports you're doing, etc. Okay, great. And so now we are just reviewing the beneficial ownership for Florence Darling. You can edit this in the middle of it, which is something that FinCEN's functionality does not have. You essentially have to start from scratch when you're using their PDF interface. So now we have our various owners added to the report. We can also remove them within the tool. And now we're going to be adding the company applicants. Now, the functionality for adding these applicants is the same as adding a beneficial owner. You can do it manually, or you can send out an invitation. And right here, we're just going to go through the motions of it. And you will also be including their FinCEN ID, because as a company applicant, this is something that they will have. And we just punch it in there. Now, and it always asks you to review and confirm the information before adding, ensuring accuracy of the information on your report. And now we are essentially reviewing the filing report before we submit it. You can also print it for your records, and it'll list everyone you added, all of their pertinent information. So this is your final sort of once over to make sure it's all good to go. And this is the portion where you will pay for the filing. So you have the option of the one-time simple one-time filing for $199, or you can do the filing plus for $249, which will allow you to file multiple times without incurring an additional cost. If you foresee any reason an update occurring in the next month or so, or if it's a very fluid ownership structure, this is the better option. And here you will check out. The person who recorded this video demo is going to punch in the corpo card number, so avert your eyes. Just kidding. Yeah, just swap that out for your payment method on Amazon, Michael, and we'll have a nice day for the...
Yay.
We'll get a lot of boxes showing up. All right, so final step, just certifying that everything you entered is accurate, not fraudulent, and file this information with FinCEN. So there you have it. What essentially took us, now obviously it's a video demo. We had a lot of this information pre-prepared, but that took us only about 7 minutes. And here is a dashboard showing a status report of all of the reports that were filed by this filer within Biz Filings. You can see waiting for FinCEN, rejected by FinCEN, in progress, etc. Which is, again, a functionality that FinCEN's website does not have. Once you submit it on FinCEN, it effectively goes into a black hole until you hear, further from them, which could be, we rejected your report, and now, oh, by the way, you're out of compliance, and you could potentially be fined in those instances. And it's also just for peace of mind. You want to know, did they actually get it? Are they actually reviewing it? Where does my report stand? And this will give you that peace of mind by having that good visibility into the status of it. And I think, Michael, the average that we expected with the typical 60 plus pieces of information needed to file a report, this could take on FinCEN's website anywhere from 2 to 2.5, maybe even 3 hours, all depending on how complex your company's ownership structure is. But 3 hours or 2.5 down to under 10 minutes is a huge value add. All right. Now that is the video. I'm going to move on to the next slide here. And we will open up the floor for questions and a little bit of Q&A. And you can just pop it into the meeting chat. I think that would be the best way to field the questions.
And if there's questions that you want us to ask FinCEN, we've done that on behalf of customers as well. We don't name them. We just, we'll go to FinCEN if that hasn't been. A lot of times it just hasn't been thought of, and so really encourage y'all. There's a portal on their site, but sometimes you just don't get a response, or you get a bot that just repeats an FAQ that makes no sense. So feel free to ask us, or say, hey, could you check on this? I would also recommend, if you're not sure about something and you want to show that you did make an effort to file something, they do have the portal where you can send an email to them. Put that in there, print it, make a copy of what your question was, and then in the unlikely event that FinCEN would come knocking on your door, you at least say, hey, I tried to file and y'all didn't answer this question. I think that helps. It certainly would when I was a investigator, that somebody made an effort to do the right thing. So that's just one of the tips.
A good point. Absolutely, Michael. Maybe we could go over some of the detail. Well, we already covered the details of the large operating company exemptions. Do you think there's any other sort of high level exemptions that our audience should know about today, Michael?
Yes, the subsidiary exemption, which is if you have a sub and you think the large company exemption may apply and you don't have to do anything. Many of our customers said, hey, we're a large company, we don't have to file. That's not exactly true, because if you don't 100% have ownership interest or substantially control the entity, the business, then the subsidiary exemption would not apply either. So it's really important to look at that one if you have other entities that are related to your business, to make sure that you just don't assume, hey, we're over 5 million, we'll do this and be good. And then the other one I would recommend is the inactive entity FAQ, which has caused no end of confusion as well. As I mentioned before, if you administratively dissolve, you're terminated your entity because you just let it go, that can still come back and cause you to have to file a business ownership report, a beneficial ownership report. And even FinCEN said, let's say you have 90 days to file, and then you decide before you file the original report, hey, I don't want to do this. This isn't going to work. I wasn't able to get investors. I'm just going to terminate. FinCEN says you still got to file. Even though you're going to terminate that entity before you file the original formation, then you do have to file a beneficial ownership report. So it's just out there in the FAQs on FinCEN site. I would take a look if you're not sure. I see about a sole proprietor. If you file just a DBA at the Secretary of State and you're a sole proprietor, you don't need to file with FinCEN. I know some states require you to file the DBA name at the Secretary of State, but if you didn't form a company there, you don't have to file.
Yeah, and I see the question from Lexi about using our services if there are errors occur. So I think what you're asking is, if there's an error in your report, is there a way within biz filings to sort of correct that error? And if that is the question, then yes. So effectively, you can go into your previously submitted report and do an update to it, and it remembers the previous report. So it's not like you have to start from scratch. And that's just a functionality that's built into the update side of things when it comes to biz filings. Because if you need to file an update directly on FinCEN, you pretty much just redo the entire report from scratch, adding in whatever changes you have. You can't just go back, find that one line you need to edit. Like if, say, someone moves to a new address, you just want to change one of the beneficial owner's address, you got to start from scratch on FinCEN. But on our tool, you can pick up the previous report and edit it right then and there and resubmit it. And that would be the same as if there was an error. Say, you pressed 1 instead of 2 on an address, and now there's an error. You can just go in and update and refile. All right, any further questions? I think we can probably keep the floor open for a couple more minutes. Yes, Tanya?
Yes, we can. I was just going to say last call for questions. If anyone has anything, Tristan, is there an email or something that everyone can reach out to if they have additional questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am obviously available. Michael is too. I will punch my email into the chat box here for everyone to feel free to reach out to. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to assist. And also, you can get with your NABO team if you're unable to reach out to me directly. If you just want to ask them questions, they can relay it back to me. I meet with them regularly. But yeah, feel free to email me at tristan.partridge@wolterskluwer.com for any specific questions, and we'll get you the answers you need.
Perfect. And one last question, how much do you charge for updates?
Got it. So the update essentially means you need to use biz filings again. So that would be another cost of $199. And if that is the case, we really start to see the value of the $249 option, which is the biz filings plus, which allows you to file again at no additional cost for the rest of 2025. It's basically a yearly thing. So if you see, for whatever reason, your ownership structure changing often, if it's just generally very fluid, or if it just has a ton of members, so it's more likely to need a change in the near future, you're definitely going to want to check out that Biz Filings Plus option for $249.
Perfect. I think that answers all of our questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And Tristan and Michael, thank you so much for bringing this super important information to our membership. And I hope everyone has a great day, and we will see everybody soon.
It was our pleasure, Tonya. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.